Welcome to this lesson on percent of a number, using fractions and decimals. Please be sure you have these notes in front of you, so we can begin our lesson. The learning objective for today says I can find the percent of a number using fractions and decimals. So let's take a look at the key concepts for today. Let's change a percent to a fraction. So if I want to make a percent look like a fraction, what I can do is I can take 45 and place it over 100. Because a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. Now I can go ahead and reduce this by dividing the top and bottom by 5. So I get 9 over 20. And just know that 9 over 20 is equal to 45%. Both values are equal. So let's take a look at our second concept that says change a percent to a decimal. If I have a percent like 45%, I can write that as 45 over 100. And in this problem, I'm taking a number like 45 and I'm dividing it by 100, which means my number is getting smaller. Anytime you divide, your numbers get smaller. So what I can do is I can place my decimal here, and I can move it 2 spaces over to the left. The reason why I'm moving it to the left is because when I divide by 100, the number gets smaller. So the decimal form of 45% looks like 45 hundredths. And please know that 45 hundredths is equal to 45%. So let's use these key concepts to solve the following examples. For example 1, it says, what is 30% of 50? We know that the word of is another word for multiply. So what I can do is I can take 30% and multiply it by 50. But before we do that, we can do this problem 2 different ways. I can make 30% look like a fraction. So 30% over 100. But I can reduce that number by dividing the top and bottom by 10. And I can get 3 over 10. Please know that 3 over 10, or 3/10, is equal to 30%. So what I can do now is I can take 3/10 and I can multiply that with 50. And you can make 50 look like a fraction by putting it over a 1. What I can do now is I can cross cancel to make my numbers a lot smaller. 10 goes into 10 once, and 10 goes into 50 5 times. Now I can multiply straight across. On my numerators, 3 times 5 is 15, and my denominators, 1 times 1 is 1. So my answer is equal to 15. So let's solve this problem a second way using decimals. I can make 30% look like a decimal by taking the decimal, which is behind the 30, and moving it 2 spaces over to the left. Remember, the reason why I'm moving it over to the left is because my number is getting smaller. When you divide by 100, your number gets smaller. So my decimal is 3/10. And please know that 3/10 is the same as 30%. So I can write this. 3/10 times 50. So after doing the math, I get 15 as my answer. Notice that I got 15 for doing this problem 2 different ways. So I know that 15 is 30% of 50. So for example 2, it's saying, what is 80% of 25? I know that the word of means to multiply. So I'm going to do this the first way using a fraction. I can make 80% look like a fraction by placing 80 over 100. And I can reduce that further by dividing the top and bottom by 20, just to make my numbers smaller. And I can do 80 divided by 20 becomes 4, and 100 divided by 20, which is 5. So my reduced fraction is 4/5. Please know that 4/5 is the same as 80%. So if I make my fraction, I can say 4 over 5. Of means to times or to multiply, so I'm going to say multiply 25. I can make 25 look like a fraction by placing it over 1. What I can do now is I can multiply across, but I can cross cancel first. So I can make 5 go into 5 once, and I can make 5 go into 25 5 times. Now I have smaller numbers to deal with. So on the top, I can say 4 times 5 is 20. And on the bottom, 1 times 1 is 1. So the answer for this problem is equal to 20. Let's do it another way now. Let's use it using decimals. I can make 80% look like a decimal by moving it over 2 spaces to the left. So my decimal form of 80% would be 8/10. Remember, 8/10 is the same as 80%. Alright, so if I take 8/10 and I multiply that with 25, because the word of means to multiply, I would still get 20 as my answer. So notice both methods gave me the same answer. So I can say that 20 is 80% of 25. So go ahead and pause the video and complete the Got It problem, and we will discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Please notice that I'm asking you to solve using fractions and decimals. And when you solve it with both methods, you should get the same exact answer. Example 3 says, what is 200% of 35? So remember, the word of means to multiply. And what we want to do first is let's go ahead and turn 200% into a fraction by placing it over 100. I can multiply that with 35, and I can make 35 into a fraction by placing it over 1. Now I can cross reduce. 5 goes into 35 7 times. 5 goes into 100 20 times. So when I multiply across, the numerator becomes 1400 divided by 20. What I notice here is I have zeros on the top and the bottom of my fraction. I can cross out this zero and this zero to make my life a little bit easier. And now if I use in and out to divide, I will get my final answer. So after doing the work, I get 70 as my answer. Let's try doing the same problem using decimal forms now. If I want to make 200% look like a decimal, what I can do is I can just divide by 100. So my decimal form becomes 2.0. If I multiply that with 35, because of means to multiply, and I multiply 35 times 2, I still get 70. Notice that both answers are the same. So using both methods, I can still say that 70 is 200% of 35. So pause the video and complete the Got It problem, and we'll discuss the answer in class tomorrow. Notice I'm asking you to solve this problem 2 different ways. I want you to solve it using a fraction and a decimal. Both methods should give you the same exact answer. So for example 4, it says refer to the circle graph. Suppose there are 300 students at York Middle School. Find the number of students that have cheese snacks. So if I look at my little chart, I know that the students that have cheese snacks is 15%. So 15% of the students at the school, of the 300 students at the school, like cheese snacks. I can say this: 15% of 300, which is the same as saying 15% times 300. So let's solve this problem using 2 different methods. Let's make 15% into a fraction. What I can do is I can take 15 over 100. Then I can reduce, or I can multiply that with 300 over 1. What I can do now is I can cross cancel. I know that 100 goes into 100 once, and 100 goes into 300 3 times. So let's multiply our numerators now. 15 times 3 is 45. And 1 times 1 in the denominator is equal to 1. So this means that 45 kids have cheese snacks. Let's solve this problem using decimals now. I can make 15% look like a decimal by placing the decimal behind the 15 and moving it 2 spaces to the left. And the reason why I'm moving it 2 spaces to the left is because the number's getting smaller. When you divide by 100, the numbers get smaller. So my decimal form is 15 hundredths. I can multiply 15 hundredths by 300. So after doing the math here, I get 45 students who prefer cheese snacks. Notice that I get the same exact answer by doing 2 different methods. So my final answer is 45 students out of the 300 have cheese snacks. So pause the video and complete the problem, and we'll discuss the answer in class tomorrow. So now that we've finished the lesson, go ahead and self-rate yourself and let us know how you feel. If there's any part of this video that you do not understand, please go back and watch it again, or write down some questions and bring it to class tomorrow so we can discuss it in further detail.